If you're in a situation where maybe you're in a smaller company and those goals aren't clear and the investment priorities are not clear, that's a pretty good indication that the company doesn't really know, doesn't have a direction. And I think no direction is probably worse than a wrong direction.
They're very confident about their work, but they keep struggling with the interviews. They're like, hey, I've done this forever, but when I go into asking that question, I don't have the structured thought process, or I don't know what the other person is expecting, and at the end of the day, it doesn't go well.
You get not study for your product management interviews and then do well. It's just not going to happen. You're not some sort of natural born product management interviewee.
What are your thoughts on figuring out what are the areas which could get the biggest investment, and do you have any tips?
Everybody has kind of unique problem. A lot of different people come to me. I have like a huge range. There's anywhere from students who are thinking about getting into product management to software engineers and designers that want to switch into product management for various reasons.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast, Everything Product. In this podcast, we focus on different product management concepts and latest technologies. As part of this podcast, we have gotten several industry leaders who spoke about their journeys on product management. I'm very excited for the episode today. We have Alex. He's a very prominent figure in the world of product management. He has a very rich background, starting from being a product manager at Google to being a founder at Product Career Accelerator. Alex has not just dedicated himself to building products, he has grown towards empowering product managers in navigating their careers. So his journey is not just about growing in the corporate ladder or building products that empower some people. This is about empowering product managers who build this world. So he's reshaping the entire product management landscape by taking time in mentoring and coaching several folks. So Alex, thank you so much for taking time and spending time with the Everything Product team today.
For sure. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. I have a lot of questions for you for sure. I know we had a very good chat in one of the meetups we had.
Yeah, we did.
The very first question I had, right, is what inspired you to start the Product Career Accelerator?
Sure. So it's a couple things. So I went through Google. Before Google, I worked at a mid-sized company. Before that, smaller companies, and I've built my own businesses in the past. And I realized that throughout that time, I was basically by myself, the entirety of the time, and it just I basically made all the mistakes, collected all the mistakes, and burnt out many times, and felt lost a lot of times, and I had to constantly pull myself out of these situations. And I realized that nowadays, obviously everybody's kind of hyper connected, and it really doesn't have to be that way. And so I've been teaching folks for the last 5 years and mentoring and doing career coaching, helping people get into top tech companies. And I realized that actually building a group like this, it's a group coaching program where we have live sessions, we have guides, and we have workshops, and we have office hours. And we try to deal primarily with ambitious product managers that want to take a proactive stance in their careers. So as opposed to just sort of going with the flow, I want to take people that are already ambitious and already hardworking and give them a little direction, a little guidance, practical tools, frameworks, practice, and get into the top tech companies or into whatever is the next stage in their career, accelerate their career trajectory, make more money along the way, hopefully have more impact. So that's the intent there.
No, that's great. We have always seen that, right? You can start as a product management professional. I've seen a lot of people online helping people come into product management role, but many a times people get stuck in between. Like you are a product manager too for a lot of time. You are a senior product manager for a lot of time, and taking that jump is one of the biggest things. So yeah, thanks for doing that. Maybe one quick question on that, right? Let's take a senior product manager who has been in the role for, let's say, 6 years now. Okay. What do you think is something that is missing in that person that's not letting them move up the ladder?
Oh boy, they're pretty burnt out. 6 years as senior product manager. Where are they working? Are they working in top tech or startups? What's happening with them? I think it's a good question. I think that the one big sticking point that people have in product management careers is going from IC, independent contributor work, to people management. And it's a little bit of a yet another catch-22 situations where people just don't know, how do I actually make the transition? And they usually wait for something magical to happen. And that's true. You can go the magical component path if you'd like. It could happen. Like, basically, what do you need in order to get people management experience? You need a product with some growth. You need something that's growing. You're not going to get new opportunities if the product is doing worse year over year or quarter over quarter. So you need some growth, hopefully significant growth. You also need some scope increases. So as the growth comes, there's new things we can invest in. There's more things we can do. And so you need someone to pick up the slack or to invest into new initiatives. And so, but the third thing that you need is good management. You need to have a good relationship with your manager. So usually people that have all three of these, high growth, possibility to expand into adjacent areas, and good management, suddenly magical thing will happen, and the manager will go, do you want to take on someone to lead and take a people manager role? And so that, yeah, maybe that's happening to our product manager, hypothetical, after 6 years. Maybe that happened. But you know what happens most of the time? Nothing happens most of the time. They have a terrible manager who does not know how to manage because they've never managed before, as was the case with me when I got into Google. I had a first-time manager who basically never managed before, ever. And I've already led 40 people teams for many, many years. And I'm coming in as an independent contributor, being managed by someone who's never managed anyone at Google, who's spent the last 10 years working as an IC at Google. So as you can imagine, disaster happens after that. So you take somebody like that, and it's never going to happen. It's just not going to happen by itself. So I do have quick pointers for people. I don't know how many of the people that are struggling with this, but it's pretty straightforward, hard to do, but easy to conceptualize. You need to make that happen. You need to get into a good manager relationship. Find a manager that understands that their job is actually to lead a team, build the team, and help them build their careers. That's step one. That's the hardest, because people don't usually think about interviewing their hiring manager. They're just like happy to get the job. Yes, all right, let's do it. I'll take any manager. It doesn't matter. Whoever I report to, all good. So the first thing is get a good manager, obviously. The second thing is you have to create these opportunities. So you build out the organizational chart. What does it look like if you were to take on somebody else? And the third thing is you try to actually find somebody else. Guess what? A lot of people want to get into product management. So if you work at a mid-sized company or above, chances are there's going to be a lot of people that want to get into a product management role from other roles, and they could be willing to work for free. That seems like a win-win for me. So you try to find somebody that can do the work, has the experiences and the skill set, but maybe is not a product manager directly, or maybe he's doing a 20% rotation, 50% rotation, whatever it is, and try to support them on their journey, basically, and get them in. That way you become an unofficial manager. You're trying to look for opportunities where you can actually become a manager without having anybody report to you. And then you build out the organizational plan. You explain to the manager, here are the initiatives, here's what we can invest in. If only I had a person. And then you try your hardest to actually get into those or influence those quarterly or annual investment strategy sessions. Yes, they do happen. A lot of product managers just think that it like magically happens. No, they do happen. CEO, and then down to the product manager, directors, and so on, we'll have these discussions. Hey, what are we investing in? How many headcount? What's the headcount that we're going to have? You got to get familiar with these things. So you have to be proactive. And this is what I'm talking about. Like, people just don't know about this stuff. They sit there for 6 years. And if they join the Product Career Accelerator, they could do it much faster. That's the thinking.
I love that you flipped the tables there too, right? Because I've started seeing this recently too. Like, many times you think about yourself, how you are doing it, how you can be better. But on the other hand, you should always look at how your manager is thinking about you, how your manager is actually performing on his end, which is causing some of these friction points. But yeah, Great thoughts. Thank you.
That's right. And I think like a couple of things which stood out to me is right, like you being proactive and making sure you have the right manager or at least getting into the role which can give you that leverage. And also sometimes, right, it is in some products it's very difficult to grow because the company doesn't invest more in that products, and it's as hard as it is, right? But what are your thoughts on figuring out what are the areas which could get the biggest investment, and like do you have any tips regarding that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, good question. You gotta, as a product manager, basically, you got to think of yourself as you're the, I use the analogy of business owner. And I don't mean that in the terms of business owner in software development. I mean, literally, you have a business, you own this business. What would you do? I don't even like the CEO analogy. You're not really the CEO, you're more
Yeah.
like the business owner. So if you were running a lemonade stand, you would be the senior product manager of your lemonade stand. So you kind of have to think about it from that perspective. So that means you have to get to know what's going on. Like, what are these executives talking about? Believe me, they, to get their fat salaries and compensations, they write a lot of strategy docs, and they'll actually put down what they think their key areas of investment are. They'll just straight up say, here are our 3 investment strategies for 2024. And if you just read that thing, and then you create your own strategy for your own business or your own whatever, wherever you're at, that mirrors the company's objectives for 2024, well, it's going to be pretty darn hard for your manager to say, no, those are not the right priorities because, well, those are literally the priorities for the company. So if you're at a big company like Google, you can read the mission statement, you can read the core values. Then if you're inside Google, you can go and read the company OKRs. Here are the company OKRs. So when you make your own OKRs, obviously below the company, there's like divisional OKRs and organizational OKRs and then product line OKRs, et cetera. But, you got to understand like the environment that you're in. And the other thing is you got to keep your career in mind. That's what you're trying to optimize for. So, so yeah, there shouldn't be, if you're in a situation where maybe you're in a smaller company and those goals aren't clear and the investment priorities are not clear, that's a pretty good indication that the company doesn't really know, doesn't have a direction. And I think no direction is probably worse than a wrong direction, right? So you might have a different set of problems in that case.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, and I think it's also always good to think about the whole landscape and put your shoes into your what your manager is doing or somebody higher up who's doing, right, and try to identify those areas and make sure, because people also might have blind spots where you can look into and give them opportunities to look into.
For
Awesome.
sure.
Yeah, and I think we have like discussed about certain things on how people can grow in their careers as leaders and all, but just to for anybody who comes to the Product Career Accelerator, right? Like, what are the different personas that come to you, and what do you have to offer to them?
Yeah. Also, great question. Thanks, Sid. A lot of different people come to me. I have like a huge range. There's anywhere from students who are thinking about getting into product management to software engineers and designers that want to switch into product management for various reasons, to early career product managers, to middle career product managers, to leaders, to heads of products and so forth. So everybody has kind of unique problems. The reality is that I would be probably a poor product manager if I tried to solve everybody's problems at once. And I am just doing this by myself on purpose right now because I want to kind of keep it small, keep it constrained. So we're focusing on people that are already in the product management career that are thinking about either getting into a new role, increasing their compensation, or growing their career. So that's the primary focus. Beyond that, of course, we do try to spend a little bit of time helping folks that are breaking into product management from other roles, but it has a little bit of a secondary view. So as an example, we do probably 20 sessions a month, 20 live sessions a month in the program. And a few of those sessions might be tailored towards getting into your first product management role. But most of the sessions are tailored towards, okay, how do we get the next role for someone that's already has them? Make sure we optimize the resume, the application, the follow-up methodology, and of course the interviews. As we know, that's a whole whole religious experience these days. The product management interview, it's it's surprisingly formulaic now, kind of across the board. You might see startups and mid-sized companies ask the same questions that Google might ask for whatever reason. That's how they think they should be doing it.
It almost feels like top consulting interviews like before.
Exactly like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, you have to study for it. There's no way around it. You can't not study for your product management interviews and then do well. It's just not going to happen. You're not some sort of natural born product management interviewee. Doesn't happen. Doesn't matter how good of a product manager you are. That's the other thing. In this day and age, you still have product managers that are like, dude, I've been doing this 10 years. I've built this, I built that, I've launched $100 million. I got this. And they come in and then they just completely run out of time and fail the interview.
That's right. Yeah.
That's another thing I've consistently observed. So I keep doing some mentoring sessions too. And what I keep seeing in people is they're very confident about their work, but they keep struggling with the interviews. They're like, hey, I've done this forever. But when I go into asking that question, I don't have the structured thought process, or I don't know what the other person is expecting. And at the end of the day, it doesn't go well. So the interviewing process and the work is like completely different.
Kind of. Yeah. And by the way, that example, that 10-year experience example, that's me. Just to make sure I'm not throwing shade at anybody. I mean, literally, I interviewed with Facebook 3 times. I got the offer twice, but the third time I did not prepare. And I mean, I've been teaching this for 5 years and I've conducted hundreds of interviews. And so you would think that I would be able to do it, but no, with no preparation, it was not consistent. Sorry. Come again next time.
You have to get the reps in.
Yeah, exactly.
No matter what. Yeah.
Yep. I have one question on the growth part again, right? So I know you spoke about giving the real world experience in the Product Career Accelerator. So can you shed some light on how do you make that happen? Like, do you get people from outside to give that real world scenarios? How do you enable people to get that experience?
So it depends for what. So if you're talking about interviews, then we have workshops that we disassemble them. So we actually have an approach called the rapid fire approach. I find that it works a little bit better than traditional, just like mock interview, 40-minute mock interview. And the reason is you're kind of able to do more reps, Sid, to your point, in one time period. So we get together is usually about 8 to 15 of us. So it's like manageable. People can kind of still get some airtime. And I will ask a question, and then I'll have somebody just do the first 3 minutes of the answer. And then we right away critique, and not critique in a bad way, but like we disassemble it. And we talk about, okay, what was said and why? How are you structuring it? How are you thinking about the answer? Are you taking the time? Are you clarifying, disambiguating? What's your plan? And then we move on to the next part and the next part and the next part. What happens is a lot of people get a chance to speak. So they put the reps into actually speaking, because you can't learn everything, read all the books and watch all the mock interviews on YouTube and then knock it out of the park. You got to actually say the words out loud. Very, very important. And so we do that, and people are able to not only speak and get a little bit of experience there, but also put on the hat of the interviewer. We say usually before, in fact, we're going to have a call right now in 40 minutes on behavioral interviews. And first thing we do is we talk about the rubric. Well, what's the interviewer thinking about? What are the signals that they're looking for specifically? What is their rubric? Because at the end of the interview, the interviewer has to take some feedback, right? Write some stuff down. What are they writing down? What are the words that they're writing down? Candidate was what? And how do you prove it? And so we actually put on the hat of the interviewer, and then people say, okay, I kind of understand what the interviewer is going to say at the end of our conversation. Therefore, I should not say some stupid stuff that I was going to say, because it will lead to the interviewer writing down kind of all over the place and not structured and not focused and no evidence. You want the interviewer to have some evidence of the positive traits, whatever it is you're trying to demonstrate. And then, of course, I do encourage people in the program to connect one-on-one and do some back and forth interviewing, but only if they have the rubric and only if they understand the signals that the interviewers are looking for. So it's not just random. The problem usually people have is like they'll have an interview and then at the end they're like, that was good. Do you have any feedback? Yeah, I guess. Like maybe you did this or did not that. If you don't have like common understanding of what success looks like, you could be guiding yourself into the wrong direction. So
I have another one. Product management role is very diverse, right? It could change a lot between companies, and not everyone is probably a good fit for it too, because you have to like constantly switch, thinking
context.
about different things. Yeah, context
Yes.
switching, and you'll have to deal with different types of stakeholders. You probably have long hours. You probably don't have a good balance, etc. So, is there a time where you saw it's like, hey, dude, this is not a good fit for you, product management role? I think you
Ooh,
should explore other things. Like, have you had
yeah.
any situations like that?
Oh man, that's a good question. So I do try whenever I'm doing a lecture or a discussion on should I get into product management or like how do I get into the first role. First couple slides, some time I do spend about like how to know if you should not be a product manager. And I think the key for me is if you don't like working with people all day long, step one, you're basically in meetings all the time. You're doing, email communications, chat communication, presentation, like you just nonstop communication. So if you don't enjoy that, it doesn't, by the way, mean you have to be some sort of like an leaning towards extrovert qualities. You can have leaning towards introverted qualities, sort of attributes, and still enjoy the actual communication with other people, just in a structured way, in a different approach. But that's one big one. That's a big flag. Like if you find yourself constantly exhausted from talking with people, you're gonna have a tough time the entire time. So for instance, like after this conversation, I'm gonna feel better than I did at the beginning of this conversation. But many people would be exhausted talking with you guys about fancy product management stuff. But I'm not like that. So that's one important trait. And I think it's not that you can't do it, it's just going to be an uphill climb, right? Because so much of it there. Then the second piece is you have to really enjoy technology and sort of be passionate about it. Because one way or another, if you're a product manager nowadays, of course you could be a PM at absolutely any. It doesn't have to be a tech organization. It could be again the lemonade stand. But most of the time, you're talking about product management. You're talking about tech. So you have to kind of be passionate about it, be excited, be interested, be knowledgeable, and not have this um, sort of fear mentality that a lot of folks have. Oh, I don't know how to code, and I have a chip on my shoulder about it. No, you should be like, oh, great. There's a new AI. Well, I'm great. Let me like learn the fundamentals here real quick. You don't have to be an expert, but you should have this general excitement and interest in technology. Uh, and then beyond that, this is the cool thing about product management. Like it's not rocket science. So beyond that, you could figure it out. If you have those two components, context switching for sure, constant ambiguity. Probably the third one that I would say is ambiguity. It's like nothing makes sense ever, and that's normal. You're not gonna ever get to inbox zero and like clear piece of paper. Like okay, I
Yeah.
totally know what I'm doing. Let's do it. That's never going to happen. But you're always, at the same time, to add a little bit of cognitive dissonance to that, at the same time, you're always the person who people look to when they feel confused. So to them, you have to be like, I totally know what I'm doing. We have a plan. Here's how it works. Here's the 5 points. We're good to go. But then inside, you're like, I don't know anything. Everything's a mess and it's confusing. So that duality can be taxing just on a purely, I mean, on a kind of a mental load.
Yeah, that's true. I've faced that a lot of times myself. Like, you should be open to continually learn, because as you get to new products, you have no clue, and you have to continually learn to make sure you tell all of those things to other people. But at the
That's
same time, you might have experts in your team who are doing certain things, but you are the ones who is taking the final decision to say no. Let's go forward with this.
all right.
No, I love the
Yeah,
thought
and
process, Alex.
Yeah, and
So
we
it's,
also joke around in the podcast saying, right, like you have to embrace uncertainty because product management is so diverse and it's different based on the size of the product, size of the company, industry, and there are so many variables. Even you doing product management in the same company, either maybe doing completely different, you could be doing completely different thing, right? Either it depends on the domain you're working on. If you're working on a data product or a platform product or a customer facing product, everything is different. So
yeah,
and also the tools you're using are different, and how you go by your work is different. So yeah.
yeah, totally.
Cool. So I want to pick your brain a little bit on your experience from Google, right? So what are some experiences or tools or cultural things which you picked up at Google, which you took forward, helping you start companies, or be more better at do what you're doing currently.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's a good question, Sid. I think that I spend a lot of time online. It just ends up like that, talking negatively about Google. My friends, my Googler friends, are always texting me like, "Oh, here he goes again, talking about something about Google." So this is a good opportunity for me to actually shed some positive light. So I think there is a pretty deep culture of respect within Google that I didn't. It's not that I fully didn't appreciate. It's just that I'm kind of in awe of what they were able to build from that perspective. So what I mean is everybody's respectful of each other inside the company at all times to a fault. So much so that like over 4 years there, I've had two situations when there was just what looked like disrespect, and one of them, it was so jarring because it just never happens that I took the person aside after it happened a couple times, and I said, "Here's what's happening. Here's the issue. I just want to let you know this is how I'm perceiving what's happening, and I'm sure other team members are as well. So here's what I would recommend. If you could try to do this, it would be really helpful to the team." And then the person was like, "Thank you for letting me know. I didn't know that this was happening, and I will try to make an effort." And then in the weeks ahead, I saw them do that same, rude thing, and then correct themselves. So like super, just crazy respectful. This goes like execs, down to everybody on the IC level, just across the board. And there's like hundreds of thousands of people working there. So it, so that was the first thing, the respectful thing. The second thing is, of course, the data driven methodology. So I thought I was data driven before. Turns out I was actually not data driven. That was wrong. I was not data driven at all. So I tried to leverage sort of like theatrics and charisma to try to push things through sometimes. Very early on in Google, and people took me aside and said that doesn't actually work at Google. So you do have to bring the data. Like your charisma won't work here. It's like the Jedi mind trick. That doesn't work here. So extremely data driven, which means that if you're having any discussion, it's always going to come down to, well, what's the data set? What makes you think this is that? And also it's the rigor with which data is analyzed. Because in other companies and other places, people use data um, as a way to back up their own already made conclusion, right? It's sort of like confirmation data. It's like first
Confirmation,
you
right?
figure
Yeah.
out what you want to do, then you find some data sets that looks good, and then you put that in there, and then good to go. So that's not data driven, right? That's outside of Google data driven. In Google, of course, you find it, and then you try to pick at it from all perspectives to try to find out what's wrong with it, try to get to the truth. And by the end, you certainly that really like gets internalized very well by everybody, not just product managers or engineers, everybody at the company. And that's why you then have Googlers and other top tech people that come out of Google. They have that rigor. By the way, it doesn't mean that it's because of Google. They could have had that rigor before Google, just to again be data driven in this discussion. But I think that just trying to take a scientific approach and trying to set a hypothesis and then try to disprove it. And like if you can't disprove it, then maybe you're right. So that's the second thing. And then I learned a bunch more what not to do. You see what I mean? I always switch
Yeah.
to the negative because there's only so much positive that you could say, because there's a lot of downsides there. A lot of downsides. So I think I'll stop there with the good stuff. I probably can think of more, but those are the two things that stand out.
Awesome. Yeah. And, sometimes, you do pick up a lot of positives, right? But, yeah, thanks for navigating that and all, right? Like a lot of experience and all. So I
Yeah.
also want to switch gears a little bit and talk about, crafting PM resumes, because I think that the landscape has been changing so fast after COVID and all, right? So we don't have as many, PM jobs as before. And, even for small company roles, there are hundreds of people who are applying. So
Yeah.
in this situation, right, so it's cutthroat. How do you craft
Yeah.
a really really good PM resume? Any tips for them? And I guess you also have a course on that, so if you can throw
Yeah.
some light on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. I think so. First of all, I don't think there's fewer jobs. It's just like you said, there's just way more candidates. So it's not like the year, 2020 or 2021 when it's, uh, I was joking that like if you put product manager on your LinkedIn, you're going to blow up with messages right away. Join our company, because it was crazy hiring spree. So different
Yeah.
times. But I think you still have healthy jobs being posted. If you do search, you'll see plenty of product management roles, because if you think about it, if you want to move your business forward and you're a big enough organization, you're going to need some product managers, because those are your business leaders, basically. Not always, but most of the time. So, so how do you actually stand out? So first is, I think you got to be very clear on what the resume needs to accomplish for you. People kind of conflate maybe what success looks like. There's two things that you want. You want the hook, and you want the deeper content. So the hook is to get someone to read your resume. The content is to get them to call you back. That's it. There's two goals for the resume. You need to have stuff in there to do both, not more. You don't need to get the job from the resume. Very important. You just need to get the recruiter call back or the hiring manager call back. So like step one is understand what you're trying to actually optimize for. Step two, I think, is this is all still before we actually work on the resume. This is all mindset and understanding. Step two is understanding that the reality of what's happening right now. It's not that the world is being unfair to you. And by the way, I empathize, and I also have plenty of people within the Product Career Accelerator that are looking for work, and it can be frustrating. And so step two is understanding like the reality of what's happening. You're going to need to have a high quality application approach, methodology, and a high quantity application and follow up methodology. You got to do both of them, and you got to do that for a sustained period of time. People come to me and I ask sometimes, well, when are you looking to get into a new role? And they say, well, this month, ideally, if I can. And I'll say, well, that's just not going to happen. So you need to adjust your expectations. You're just going to be disappointed, and it's going to affect your ability to perform. So if you're training for a marathon, for instance, you are not going to expect to run the whole marathon the first time that you practice. That would be unreasonable. So the same thing here is you got to have reasonable expectations. So it's set the right expectations. This is going to be a 3-month plus. It could be plus plus plus. By the way, it could be 6 months, 8 months. Like it's the reality is that many people struggle to get past that first challenge, the hook. If your resume is never getting seen, it doesn't matter if you apply 1,000 times. So you got to understand what problem I'm actually solving for. Like if you've already been applying and you've never heard back, and you've also not really gotten back like negative response, like we're not interested, then probably your resume is not being seen. So one of the first things that we look for is a lot of what people call rejections. I call them not a good fit. We need to get those responses back that lets us know someone is at least somewhere out of the corner of their eye looking at our resume. Because if you're not getting that, no one's even reading your resume. So understand what problem you're optimizing for. Once you've solved the hook problem, and you're getting people to actually read your resume, you're applying quickly, you're doing a bunch of other best practices, then it's going to be about the content. And the content in general is, you got to think about, what is the hiring manager looking for? Like, what is their problem that they're solving? It's not about you. It's about what they think about their business. And by the way, when they wrote that job description, they probably just asked ChatGPT to write it. So a lot of it is just nonsense. You got to find the 3 things that they wrote themselves. They said, ChatGPT, you got to help me out. I have no idea how to write a job description. Please just give me a generic product manager description, but there's these 2 things that I'm really looking for. Let's put them in there. So, I jest, but only slightly, because as you know, people don't know how to write job descriptions. Also, they have no idea. All right. So you got to optimize for what the hiring manager wants. They wrote this job description. It's a bunch of nonsense and generic gobbledygook. Okay, what are the 2 things? Oh, you need ads experience, or like you need B2B experience, or like you need to have done this exact thing. Like, I'm really looking for somebody to go, product led growth or launch or execution or whatever. Usually they're going to be specific in 1 or 2 or 3 things. So just write down those 1 or 2 or 3 things. And make sure your resume answers those actual problems at the top, and it's bold, so that, and then when you send it over, they can look at the top 3 sentences and they'll say, okay, yes, this matches. Do you see what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
people like completely, they just thinking of this like esoteric thing. Like, this is my resume. It's everything about me. Like, I play volleyball.
I completely agree with you, right? So the resume has one freaking job to do, which is to get you the first call, not your interview, or it's not a laundry list of everything which you have done your entire career.
That's
I've
right.
seen so many resumes like that where the list, it goes on pages and pages, and no one has time to even go through that, right? Yeah.
Right. So yeah, nowadays people are like very ChatGPT heavy, both on the writing of the resumes and the writing of the job descriptions, and then the reading of the job descriptions and the reading of the resumes. It's gotten ridiculous. But at the end of the day, unfortunately, by the way, the systems, as you can tell, clearly messed up and not working well. But guess what? Many people write to me, it's like, oh man, the hiring landscape is broken. We got to fix it. Okay, sounds good. Well, yeah, tell me, what do you have in mind? Like, that's the problem, is I don't know how to fix it right now. You got these people and you got these other people, and none of them really know what they want to do or who they need. And so this is why we have this like broken system, and that's what we have.
I love the way you told that, Alex. Like, ChatGPT writing the job description, ChatGPT writing the resume, and they both are talking to each other. No,
Right.
this is great, Alex. Love the conversation.
And
so
we,
far, right?
just to cap that off, we do work on that quite a lot in the Product Career Accelerator. I do have a course for people that want to just sort of, hey, here, Alex, what are all your best practices? I'll do it myself. Like, here it is. I have a course. It's easy. It's you should definitely use it if you're struggling with this. It's like a one-time use and forget forever. Meaning, like, hopefully you will from here on in know how to make a product manager resume. But it's totally, I totally get it that it's a challenge for people.
Nice. Yeah, and for everyone who's watching, right, I'll link all the courses that Alex is teaching in the job description. So please go and bug him a lot.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Awesome. Lovely conversation, Alex. We loved it. Like, we went from talking about like early product managers to product managers growth to resume to having a conversation to interviews, etc.
Yes.
Before we conclude, right, just want to ask a couple of things. So one, like, for anyone who is coming into product management or growing, like, any books that you can recommend? Doesn't have to be product management too. Any suggestions there?
Yeah. So one book that I've been recommending is Thinking Fast and Slow, which is for kind of have a different view on data and, well, honestly, like the way that we interpret things, the way that we make decisions. So I think that one is an important read for any product manager that wants to understand, because you need to understand human behavior a little bit and you understand yourself a little bit better. So that one, I think, is a great one. Then, I have a whole bunch of books, and I hesitate to recommend them. So I would rather give you like there's plenty of great books. I'm surrounded by books all over me, but it depends. Like I would rather give you my advice about consuming content in general, which is that I don't want you to build a list of like, here's these 20 books that I must read. I would say start out with as much practice as you can. You have, probably like fundamentals of product management somewhere that you can pick up. From there on, I would just like deal with one challenge at a time, prioritize, and then address that topic. For product managers, I would say start from like the specific problem that you're dealing with, as opposed to trying boil the ocean. And in general, if I'm making general recommendations, it would probably be Marcus Aurelius' book from 2,000 years ago on called Meditations, right? About his personal journal. And I think that one is sort of an introduction to Stoicism that can be helpful, I think, as a general sort of life philosophy. And I would start from there and then deal with one problem at a time.
Nice, lovely. Maybe one last question before we conclude.
Sure.
Would you recommend any podcasts?
Present company included. So I have this is like maybe counterintuitive, but I do have a pretty strict informational diet that I try to stay on. It depends what phase of development you're in, like personal development and business development. There is the learning and there's the doing. So once you're in execution, you've got to have a pretty strict informational diet. You can't be out there watching YouTube for hours a day, picking up educational content. You can't be listening to podcasts all day long. So again, give yourself permission to relax maybe with a few educational podcasts that you enjoy, but try to stop yourself. And this is, by the way, a problem that I struggle with. So whenever I do a new element of the business or I want to try a different area, like before doing YouTube videos, for instance, I watched a bunch of content and doing YouTube videos. And then what's worse is in between, I would take long breaks to watch a bunch of content. And the watching and the studying, we all know this. This is an ongoing problem. You got to give yourself like a hard stop. You can't be learning, just usually do the 80-20 thing, right? You learn 80% of the way. That you can do it pretty fast, right? You remember the Dunning-Kruger effect when like very quickly you feel super confident in something or like pretty confident. And then as you keep learning more, you actually get less confident in that thing.
And you don't know enough, right?
Exactly. So you want to stop. You want to stop yourself. You actually want that stupid confidence, so to speak, that first stage of the Dunning-Kruger effect. You want it because then the rest you're going to get feedback from reality, and let that guide you a little bit more. Now, I'm not saying look, there's fundamental things. If you know, I'm trying to pick up knowledge in a specific thing, and it's well defined, and it's also like well understood scientifically or like academically, then yes, you could just invest in whatever is necessary to learn that. But as we get out there exploring general podcasts and YouTube videos and all this, you got to be careful. You got to be careful. Pick one or two, give yourself a time limit, and then go out there and execute and build your life and build your product.
That's true. Yeah, I've faced that myself too. Like as we create content, right? We continually go and figure out, okay, what else we should do and stuff. After some time, it's like too much overload. And many times you also observe that you're not implementing it. You read a lot of books, but how much did you implement?
Yeah. So I try to write down usually from a book. I'm simultaneously reading maybe like 12 books at a time. People don't like this, especially completionists, right? They'll be like, I got to finish my books. But if you see, I have bookmarks. Bookmarks are my favorite things. I have bookmarks all over the place. I've tried to take notes and attach them in, little notes inside books, and it doesn't work. I've tried to take notes digitally. It doesn't really work for me. So what I do is I will read a book And usually most books that I read, from the nonfiction stuff is like self-development, business development, this type of stuff. I will read until I get something concrete that I want to implement in one way or another. And then I just go and implement that thing and I stop reading. I will just stop reading. And then when I've implemented it, by the way, it could work, it could not work, then I can continue reading. And at the same time, I'm reading multiple books. So I'm making simultaneous progress, because that's what, if you're reading for entertainment, it's a different thing. But if you're reading to get better at life, business, or whatever, then you've got to start putting it into practice. So I agree, Phani, for sure. Pick a thing, do it, go from there.
They say, right, like you learn from 10% from reading it, 20% from teaching others, and 70% from actually doing it rather. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And teaching, by the way, Sid, that's a great point. Like, teaching is a great thing. Like, I got way better at interviews and at business by teaching people how to do interviews and business and so on.
Awesome, Alex. Wonderful conversation. Thank you. Thank you again for taking time and spending time with us. So for everyone who's watching, please reach out to Alex, check out his courses, and he has wonderful knowledge from industry experience. So definitely reach out to him. And don't forget to subscribe to Everything Product as well.
Yes, I agree. Definitely do.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, guys. Take care.